believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Rika, the Renaissance known as Ricky Brands, and a great episode for you today. Great returning guest, filmmaker, producer, journalist, Chris Emery. He's been on the show before as a solo guest. He's also been on in the past with James Corbett when we did an amazing deep dive into the OKC bombing. And if you want to find that episode or any past episode of mine, just go on to rippleeffectpodcast.com. You can search for him. And if you guys aren't familiar with Chris, he is a part of Free Mind Films. It's his film company that has done some amazing documentaries, one called A Noble Lie about the OKC bombing, another one called State of Mind, The Psychology of Control, which is an amazing documentary I'm always referencing and recommending to people. Another great documentary, which we talk about on the podcast, is called Shadow Ring. And you can find all these documentaries on his website, Free Mind Films. For a while, these documentaries were available on Amazon Prime, and a few other mainstream places, but of course they've been censored, and now the best place to find them is freemindfilms.com. You can find those links in the show description, so please check that out. I'll keep this intro short. I've been super busy and I want to get this episode out quickly, so the shorter this intro is, the less editing and recording I need to do. So if you want to support the show, of course, like I always tell you guys, this is a Value for Value show. Go to my website, rippleeffectpodcast.com, or in the show description and find all the ways you can help support the show. And that's it. Enjoy this amazing conversation with journalist and filmmaker Chris Emery, and also check out his recent appearance on my other show, which I co-host with Sam Tripoli, Midnight Mike, and Charlie Robinson, called The Unit Unwanted. He joined us on 9/11 to talk about, of course, 9/11, false flags, and other related topics. And I can't recommend that episode and that show, The Unit Unwanted, enough. We actually just recently got a shout out by Sam Tripoli on JRE. He was on Joe Rogan's show doing a fight companion and mentioned how awesome the Union of Unwanted podcast is. So please check that out. Enjoy this conversation, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
Exactly. That's why I like your show, man. You got a good variety of guests. So when do we go live?
We're live. Let's jump into it.
Okay. The audio okay?
Yeah, you sound nice and loud and clear, and yeah, we can start here if you would like. And well, Chris, thanks for coming back on the show. It's been quite a bit. If for people who are listening who might not be familiar with some of Chris's work, because I think last time you were on was quite a while ago, but Free Mind Films has done some historic documentaries, some stuff that just stands the test of time. One of them being that the poster behind you, A Noble Lie, about the OKC bombing. And we have a awesome podcast we did with James Corbett some years ago on that event, where we kind of went through a bunch of the evidence and the official story, the unofficial story, and all the inconsistencies with the story and why it's important. And I think, I love the fact that you guys did such a phenomenal documentary on that event, because I think with all the false flags and all the things to talk about throughout history, it does seem to be one of the forgotten stories, but not because it's not instant. It's not because it's not significant. It's just because, like I said, it just for some reason it seems to be kind of left behind in regards to like major historical events in the U.S. But if you want to let people know a little bit of your background, for people who haven't, maybe some new listeners who haven't went back in the archives and found some of these gems of episodes, let people know a little bit of your background, and then we can jump right into what maybe you've been up to, and we can expand on everything and anything from there.
Sure. Thanks for having me back on, Ricky. I am glad to see that you're on the Band.video channel with InfoWars. It's a huge exposure. And then, of course, you've got how many different platforms. And before we continue on, I do want to acknowledge, Alex Jones and the InfoWars crew. If it wasn't for them, we would probably still be a small independent film company. The exposure we were given, my God, we're talking December of 2011 was when our first film was released to an audience of over 3.5 million people on a daily basis. That's since, I think, quadrupled or at least tripled now. Anyway, I started out as a sports photographer, so we were kind of bantering back and forth on a little bit of sports trivia and so forth, as a freelance photographer with the NCAA. And that put together my acumen for business and getting organized and dealing with clients from pretty much all walks of life. Some of them would later go on to the pros, but my forte is organizational skills, and the company that I am proud to co-own is called freemindfilms.com. That's our website, Freemind Films. You can watch our films for free. They're all three of them are actually posted on the website. Just click on the movie poster, and that takes you to our absolutely wonderful distributor, ITN Distribution, based out of LA. And the reason you can watch it for free, and the reason I bring that up, is that you no longer have to watch pirated copies on YouTube, which was the thing to do back in the day. We make our money on the ad revenue that are interdispersed throughout the movies. So if you could be kind enough to support us that way. But I started off with a small production studio in Fort Worth, Texas. We were doing anywhere from 15 to 28-minute biographical documentaries. And then I had the opportunity to move to Oklahoma City and work on the Oklahoma City bombing case, and that was a feature-length film. So for any of you upstart or folks that are considering getting into filmmaking, start out small, get into, if you can, in a small studio, and work on small projects. And then when you get into the feature-length films, all I had to do was extrapolate the size of the crew, the budget, and then, of course, the time and the effort dedicated to getting the film together. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. If you do want to contact me, and this is important, feel free to contact me on my email address, which is my initials, CC, and then Emery, EM as in Michael, ERY, at protonmail.com. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions on starting in filmmaking. We've got 15 years of production almost under the belt now. So, we actually, almost 20 years. We actually formed as a film company formally in 2010, but I have the production of this film that spanned back 20 years ago when I moved to Oklahoma City in January of 2003. So having said that, Ricky, you've been an absolutely wonderful support. You were with us, I believe, on that first month that we released the film. So that's talking almost 12 years ago. This December 4th will be 12 years. Wow. So. And then the relevancy, people say, well, why the Oklahoma City bombing? It happened 20 years ago, this past April. Well, we do have some the same characters that are the subterfuge and the cover-up and the corruption within the Justice Department. And I'm not here to poke, anybody's fingers in anybody's eye or use any profanity or anything like that. We want to take a professional approach and tell the generations that have passed, 2.5 years or 2.5 generations, why this is still relevant. Merrick Garland, our current Attorney General, was responsible. He spearheaded a group of 30 people that, with malice and with forethought and with over $69 million at their disposal, to cover that case up. And there's a lot of similar patterns that are moving forward to how he corrupted just abhorrent what he did to the J6 defendants. I had the opportunity to meet with one of them this past Friday, less than 70 miles from here. He's incarcerated at a detention facility. Joe Biggs just sentenced to 18 years, 17 years? Horrendous. And oddly enough, there's a good chance he's going to be incarcerated at a facility less than an hour and a half north of where I live here on the west side of Florida. So, but Merrick Garland was in charge of all of that. He could have said, hey, look, we need to give these guys a fair shake. BLM did infinitely worse damage, infinitely worse crimes than the J6 defendants. And look where these guys are sitting. They're going to molder in prison from anywhere from 18 to 25 years. It's horrible. So having said that, I did send you the link to my imdb.com profile. I gave you a review of some of the cases that I've worked on over the years. So we can go in that direction. The connection to 9/11. A lot of folks aren't aware of the close connection between Oklahoma City and 9/11. We can kind of do a small deep dive into that. So whatever direction you want to go, Ricky.
Yeah, and before we get into that, I also want to highlight some of the other films you've done because it's not just the Oklahoma City bombing film. The State of Mind, Psychology of Control, which some of you guys might know, Richard Grove, he's a good friend of the show and somebody that I've gotten
Oh,
really
yeah.
throughout the years. He was a part of that documentary and one of the best documentaries in regards to really understanding social engineering and propaganda and really like the title of the movie, The Psychology of Control. And I think, the thing about that type of stuff is we think though these are like new techniques and new things, right? That to deal
Mhm.
with, new issues to deal with. But it's like it's been going on since the beginning of history. And you guys did a great job of going back historically, and showing people how there's always been people and people want to control those people. And they've always found ways of doing so. And, it's
Correct.
new thing and it's also not a thing that went away either. That's there's two type of mindsets. You get the people who think like, okay, like they're not doing it now, maybe they used to do it but they're not doing it now, and that's incorrect because it's like, now they're just better at hiding it or convincing you they're not controlling you. And
Sure.
and then there's people who don't realize that these techniques have been going on since the beginning of time. So it's really important documentary. And then of course Shadow Ring, which is another great documentary. Kevin Sorbo, who's been on the show a couple times, narrated that documentary. And I know you had tons of great people in that documentary. I know Ben Swan, and it's been a while since I watched it, but I
Oh,
know
yeah.
quite a few great people in that documentary. So all three are very much worth watching, and it just I can't recommend those documentaries enough. I bring up State of Mind all the time because I think you get a better understanding of today if you follow the steps backwards and you realize you learn how we got here, and then you also learn that maybe history doesn't always repeat but it rhymes much of the time. It's definitely very similar.
Can I share a real quick backstory with Richard and what he did for us? So we brought him on as we wanted to interview him. I mean, this guy is an amazing repository of expertise and information. So we interviewed him. One of the our staff members who remain confidential was not able to finish writing the script for State of Mind, Psychology, Control. Richard stepped in and knocked it out of the park for us. There's no way, and I'm going to say this definitively right here, right now, and I've shared this on other interviews. There's absolutely no way we would have finished that film without his help. And his wife, at the fiance at the time, did an amazing job of narrating it for us. So the Groves, both husband and wife, fiance at the time, just helped us out. Now the odd thing is that Richard actually released a film called The Noble Eye prior to us releasing our Oklahoma City film. So people cut the title of our film off short, and it says, well, ours is actually Noble Eye, Oklahoma City, 1995. And let's see, and then of course his production company released that excellent film. There was who is it? His mentor. He told me a real good backstory about the gentleman from New York that they became friends with, and he won several awards in education. The name slips my mind, but we feature him in the film also. So Richard's probably, I'd say, well over three-quarters of that film is influenced by his work and his expertise and what he's done. And so much so that when we released that film, we were actually at the InfoWars studio. So we're talking June of 2013. The film was originally officially released a month later. Alex bought, this is when DVDs were still the rage, sold out 10,000 DVDs in that film, probably within about 3 weeks. And that's on the standard format, and sold another 5,000 on the Blu-ray. Richard's in studio, and we did a really good layout of the breakdown of the film. So we did an extended, almost a 3-hour interview. And here we are, after we're done with that, we wrap, and we're in the boardroom of InfoWars. And this is a huge credit to Richard and the InfoWars staff. And I'm just sitting back in the corner of the boardroom, watching Richard school all of us in a very great way. He's writing, they look like Einstein at the marker board, just writing all these, theories and basically mental formulations of how you get from one train of thought to the next. And Alex is back taking notes. And I thought, wow, here's some of the best minds, in independent media. And that video was on YouTube for a while. Unfortunately, they scrubbed all of the InfoWars, most of them, the the videos, but that is a testament to the expertise that Richard has done for our film and continues to do to this day. So hats off to both of them.
Yeah, I remember watching that video, like watching you guys on InfoWars and Richard just going crazy, you know, and I think when he came on, because once Richard gets going, it's like
phenomenal.
Yeah, I think when he came on, we ended up doing the longest episode I've ever done. I think it was like 3.5 hours or something ridiculous, and it flew by because I'm just trying to keep up with Richard. It's like information overload, and I'm just like, I'm gonna have to take notes, you know, or re-listen to this about a few times. But he is, and then I had the pleasure of you know, when I met him from doing podcasts together, I found out that at the time he was living in Hartford, and you know, I live right over the border in Massachusetts, and near Springfield, Massachusetts, and so I'm like, hey, let's meet up. And then our families met up, and he was such a sweetheart, and his wife's a sweetheart, and they have a beautiful son, and just a great, great guy, and you know, always a blast to talk to and hang out with. And his podcast, Grand Theft World podcast, is a great podcast, and really, you know, just the amount of information I mean, again, if anybody can do a weekly 6-hour podcast, it's Richard. That show, I'm like, how do they do this all on one week? I mean, this is insane. But only somebody like Richard could have the mental power to not, like, halfway through the show, I'd be like, I think my brain would overheat, and and I would just like turn off. You know, it's like, how is he still? You know, but he is an amazing person, and a great wealth of knowledge. His old podcasts, the Peace Revolution podcast, I mean, those things are work of art. I mean, just the amount of work that he put into that, you know, it's insane. If people have not gone back, and I think it's still available somewhere, it's probably still available somewhere. Peace Revolution podcast was just phenomenal. I mean, he would take clips of media coverage and just tell this whole story on 9/11 or the JFK assassination. You would hear media coverage and little audio of interviews and stuff that you've never heard of, and just like, oh my God. And when you piece it all together, you realize how obvious it is that there's real life conspiracies and there's a real life cover up and all these things. So just phenomenal. But and then your other film, Shadow Ring, I mean, the fact that Kevin Sorbo, who I grew up watching in Hercules, I mean, that was, you know, one of the biggest shows in the 90s. And
he was fun to work with. He really was. Just a great guy.
And been very outspoken, and you know, it what does that, you know, what does that tell you, you think? Did when you see people like him who are so passionately putting their careers aside and saying, you know what, it's more important for me to be outspoken than it is to try to do what's best for my career, does that give you hope? I mean, in the film?
He completely did he did the off ramp of all the debauchery and the, you know, the stuff you hear on TMZ and everything. Kevin's the polar opposite of that. He's a great family man. I had the opportunity to meet his wife via a Zoom meeting not long ago, and they live on the other coast here in Florida. They moved from California. But again, a quick backstory on that. And our director of new product or new business development on Santa Monica worked with Kevin in the past. Had done some marketing for him, I believe, on some of his marketing for the Hercules series. Anyway, so I get a call. This is in March of 2000. Gosh, the movie released in June of 15, like 2 weeks after I moved here from Oklahoma City. So we're talking March of 2014. We sent Kevin half the script just to see what, you know, as far as reading the voiceover. I'll never forget this. He calls me from the produce aisle at a Trader Joe's in West LA or East LA, Westlake. And he says, I'm in. I says, Kevin, we only sent you half the script. What are you talking about? He says, I love this. He says, I've been wanting to do something like this for years. And so that September, Austin and some of the other guys on the crew flew out, and he did 2 days to do the voiceover. And during the break, you can't keep, you know, you've got to take your 15, 20-minute breaks in between takes. He steps out and he's talking to my business partner. He says, is this for real? I mean, we're going through all of the, you know, not the Illuminati, but the Rothschilds and the breakdown of how we did it in the film. And he was still astonished. And you could tell that, the wheels were, you know, moving, and he wanted to learn more. And we were flattered that he was on that project with us. So anyway, it's always interesting to go back and think, gosh, how do we get these people on? And we weren't starstruck, but we knew that he was good at what he did and his voiceover. Hell, he just finished doing and Kevin could correct me if I'm wrong, 2 weeks before we got him in booth out of Santa Monica for the voiceover, he just nailed the job for Maserati, and they paid him absolutely crazy money to do that. But that's just the voice he had. It was very reassuring, very confident. And again, just perfect timing. So,
well, that's a part of the ripple effect. I mean, I truly believe we all are ripples. And Kevin ended up being, I believe him and his wife have separately or together, but definitely separately, I think.
Sorbo Studios is doing a great job. Yeah, they do both secular and faith-based films, and she has her own radio show and is doing a great job. Family oriented. They homeschool their kids, and
because they've been on the Patrick Bet David show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's funny. And this is like I was saying, like this is kind of just the power of the ripple effect. You think about it. You reach out to Kevin Sorbo, you get him on a film that exposes him to all this information, right? That he might have not been aware of. Years later, he's on Patrick Bet David's show, which is a huge show, and he's probably sharing some of the information that you taught him. And we
help each other out. Yeah.
And that's just like that's the importance of like being outspoken and having these conversations with people, trying to get through to people. And I get it, like you don't save, like one of my co-hosts on the Union of Unwanted, Sam Tripoli, he's always like, you can't save people who don't want to be saved. And I think there is a part of that, a part of me that agrees with that thinks like there are just some people out there that I might just never get through to, and that's okay. But if I can plant a seed, right? If I can plant a seed of understanding how the world really works, or plant a seed on how, in regards to social engineering or big pharma or the military industrial complex, how dangerous these organizations and groups really are and how much influence they really have over our lives, then maybe, with help of other seed planters, we're all just, everybody's kind of just watering that seed a little bit. Something
sure.
And they'll they open their minds to these ideas. And I mean, ignorance is bliss. I completely understand. Like sometimes you watch Shadow Ring, you're like, maybe I shouldn't have watched this movie because the world seemed much more pleasant before I watched the movie. But I also don't want, Sean Stone talks about this, and Sean Stone's awesome. And I forget where he was interviewed. I don't think he was on the Ripple Effect when he was saying this, but I remember him talking about his documentary, The Best Kept Secret, which is a really good documentary series, and he went into like some really dark places, from like the child trafficking, pedophilia to Illuminati, rituals, all this stuff. And he's like, I'd rather know these things exist and and have a better understanding of the world than live in ignorance and not really understand the world that I live in, and I think that's kind of how we all are. We're all just super curious people who are willing to go down some rabbit holes to try to discover, what the world really is made of and how it's really run. And then hopefully if you have a heart, you try to do your part in making it better.
Right. The gentleman, oddly enough, that showed me the raw footage, and I think I've shared this on previous interviews with you, what people asked me, why did I get involved with the Oklahoma City case? Well, I just got done, and it's listed on that projects that I worked on my imdb.com profile. The downing of TWA 800 off the coast of Long Island, July of '96. Horrendous cover-up by the NTSB, Department of Defense, the FBI. We did have a lot of good people from the Port Authority in New York, and the New York Highway Patrol, and even some retired FBI agents came forward and said, look, this is the information. Anyway, the gentleman that he knew that I was asked to step away from that case because a family member of mine was threatened with their job, with the TWA case. And again, if people have any questions on that, they can email me. I'll steer them in the right direction. But the gentleman by the name of Jerry Longspaw had almost 4 hours of raw footage. Back then, it was 1995, the morning of the bombing. They had the 3/4-inch Betamasters. Maybe you're familiar with that technology before digital. And he calls me up and he says, look, understand you got sacked on the TWA case. Would you be interested in looking at Oklahoma City? I said, Jerry, I'll give you 45 minutes of my time. showed up at his house, Northwest Fort Worth. And 3 hours later, I walk out of his living room after watching the raw footage, Ricky. This is stuff that CNN, NBC, CBS, the flagship stations out of New York and Atlanta, it was so graphic that they could not run it up the satellite feed. They said, "Oh, hell no, we got to vet this stuff. There's no way." People would have just gone nuts watching this stuff live. The reason being is, and with all due respect, and and I'm going to say this as tactfully as I can, it did look like it was off the set of The Walking Dead. It was unbelievable. It was, I mean, people were injured. They were coming out with all forms of physical malady and disability. It was unbelievable. And I looked at Jerry and I says, after going through the 3 hours, we rewound some of it. And I said, well, this doesn't make any sense of the narrative. How the hell could this happen according to the narrative? So one by one, we were completely just destroying the official narrative, watching this live footage. Parts of the building that were damaged that shouldn't have been damaged because of the alleged truck bomb and so forth. So that inspired me to find, that was in the fall of 2003. I was still in Fort Worth. And then by January of 2003, I made my way to Oklahoma City, got a small apartment 9 blocks from ground zero, and lived there at that apartment for 6.5 years. And I immersed myself in the crime scene. Most people don't know that the crime scene was bigger than the 4 square blocks that you saw on the satellite uplink, the feeds every day. CNN even had a bureau there for 90 days. It was actually almost 8 square miles. And the reason we say that is that we knew where the perps were staying in the hotels, the route, they called it the caravan of death. There were actually 9 vehicles that morning that went to the bomb site, dropping off the perpetrators. There were 12 to 18 people involved. There were more than just the Ryder truck. That was basically a red herring, because the building, as we show in the film, was starting to come down at least 5 to 8 seconds before the truck bomb went off. So, looking back, the backstory as our film crew, we basically reverse engineered what happened in the months and the weeks and the days and the hours and the minutes before the bombing, and then reconstructed the story that made more sense based on the photos and the physical evidence and the eyewitness testimony, the survivors' testimony, search and rescue, law enforcement, private investigators. And that's what we were able to get in that 2 hours and 8 second, I think, total runtime on that film, even though we had 6.5 hours of footage. So there was also a tie-in with 9/11. But then again, this is your interview, Ricky. We can go in whatever direction you want to go. So.
Oh, we can go anywhere. I mean, if anything that you think is significant or you want to chat about, we can talk about. If you want to go into some of the 9/11 ties, that's great.
That's so the bombing happens in 95, in April of 95. Of course, 9/11 is in September of 01. As we were getting into pre-production, we're talking, I want to say 2006, we started shooting on a rudimentary camera we got off of eBay, and rebuilt that thing, put a new audio jack, new light jack, everything. And that was our go-to camera. So we were starting to get the preliminary interviews together, and a producer with Alex, who was Rob Dew's predecessor. This other producer did a great job. They had a parting of ways. And so anyway, about a year before he left InfoWars, he contacted us. This would have been, just trying to do the timeline right now, it would have been in I remember it was still cold in Oklahoma City, January, February of 07. And he said, yeah, this guy's been contacting me for almost a year and a half. He says that he saw Muhammad Atta and 4 other perps in the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and early Sunday morning before 9/11. Well, 9/11's on a Tuesday. And I says, Kevin, what are you talking about? And he says, no, you have to look at this information. And sure enough, he gave us a name and phone number. He was a bartender at a country western bar on the western side of Oklahoma City. And sure enough, one of my crew members and I went over. Again, we thought, we'll give this guy a half hour, 45 minutes and, be done with it. And there again, it was almost 4 hours. And we walked out of the house stunned. And it's like, wow, this is crazy. But that was a thought bubble that we had to put literally separate from. We were in the throes of getting our film with Oklahoma City done. How in the world could we work on both projects? Well, it just so happened that this bartender helped us go through all this intel. And for a year and a half, we verified every single piece of paper, the receipts, the eyewitness testimony, corroborated everything. 4 different witnesses, in a nutshell, saw Muhammad Atta and 4 of his accomplices at that bar that Thursday, actually at the Oklahoma City National Memorial, which had been open for, at that point, I believe, for at least 4 years. They were kicked out because they were carrying on and yelling and not paying attention to the docents and the security guards. They were literally kicked out of the memorial, if you can believe that. So that was one witness. And then this bartender, his manager, and one of the bouncers saw them at the bar carrying on, pulling a knife on some regular patrons. Really odd that the patrons were kicked out because they had nothing to do with pulling the knife. They didn't start the fight. And Atta and his 4 accomplices were still allowed to hang out there. There was a bar receipt for 5 drinks, which verifies that, yes, there were 5 individuals at $3 a shot. And it was, they requested liquor that wasn't served there. So the bartender gave them basically the well liquor that they had. And here's another red flag. Atta and his 4 accomplices stiffed the bartender. Bartenders don't forget that. You know, it's like, okay, these guys are going to come back. They're going to make a mess and they're not going to tip me, you know, whatever. And then, and the other red flag on the bar receipt itself, and I believe I sent you the article earlier today. You're welcome to leaf through that and we can do a follow-up interview. There is a photo of that bar receipt. That credit card, it was an American Express credit card, expired at the end of March of 2001. Now, how the hell do you run a credit card in September that expired in March? Makes no sense, but it went through. And the bartender says, in the 18 years he'd been bartending, he says he's never seen that happen before. So all of these red flags are popping up. And we did have, and I shared this on other interviews in the last with Pete Santilli and Christy Lee, we did have a very helpful female Secret Service agent based out of Fort Worth. She's retired. She helped us run the number on that card. And here's what we found out, Ricky. And this is where it really this goes down the rabbit hole. That card was, American Express card was based out of a bank in Malta off the coast of Greece. There was only 3 account holders at that bank. The CIA, the MI6, which the foreign intelligence arm of British intelligence, and Israeli Mossad. And I'm thinking, wow. So after we found that out, she called me and said, look, I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to help you out. This is a rabbit hole that I should not have gone down. He said, her former bosses in Washington chewed her out, one side up on one side and the other, and said, don't ever ask us for your help again. You popped up red flags and opened doors that we had no business opening up. And that's it. That's the last I heard of her. But that was resolute proof that we knew that we're over the target. And yes, this individual, and it was Muhammad Atta. The receipt is signed under an alias, obviously. Just some innocuous, it would be the equivalent of John White in the Middle East. We have no idea who this individual was. But it's consistent with, the sightings. Some of those hijackers we found out later, even BBC acknowledged it months and years later, that 7 of the 19 hijackers were actually alive and well, that their passports were stolen. And who the hell knows, who's on the flight manifest. So that was a whole side issue that we pursued as a film crew. And the culmination of all this, and the reason I bring this up, Ricky, is that we had the Oklahoma Gazette, which is an independent newspaper in Oklahoma, the Austin Chronicle. There's an alliance of independent papers. Their senior editor, who was a former speechwriter for Frank Keating, the governor of Oklahoma at the time of the bombing, he and I established a good working friendship. And he said, look, I like your work, what you guys are doing on the bombing. I said, we got a whole different cache of information here. I said, would you be interested in looking at this stuff about the sighting of, the 9/11 perpetrators? And he says, yeah, sure. We found out he had hired out a writer 2 weeks beforehand from an independent paper out of Tulsa. We're in the boardroom of the Oklahoma Gazette. And that lasted maybe an hour meeting. There were 5 of us from the crew. We laid it all out, all the information we had. That was, Jack Blood did a great job in that article. And he says, yeah, we want to run with this. We're going to do at least a 3, if not a 5-part series on this. Well, I ran into the writer 2 days later saying, hey, you guys got some legs on this thing? You're going to run with it? And he said, I was fired. The day after he talked to us, he said he was fired. And the senior editor didn't want to fire him, but he got the phone call from the local FBI office, the field office in Oklahoma City. They had egg on their face. They'd been sitting on this information for 5.5 years. And we were ready to come out as a film crew that had no idea that they were working on it and just blow the lid right off of it. And that did not sit well with them. As the old saying goes, you get a little too close to the sun, you're going to get burned. The writer got fired, and Phil and I had talked since that day. He says, look, I can't work with you anymore. I've been given orders just to pretty much put the lid on this. So you never know, Ricky. Of all of the people that you've interviewed and the projects you worked on, I revere what you do. I mean, this is an honor to be on your show. But you're right, the ripple effect. You never know when you're going to come across a body of information, and you have to make a choice. Do you want to, pursue it? And if you do, what are the consequences? So that's just a connection to 9/11 right there.
Well, I think the thing that we all have in common in the alternative media community is that, and thank you for the kind words. I'm just this show's only exists because people like you have been gracious enough to come on and let me pick at your brain and share some knowledge and information and wisdom with the listeners. But yeah, the thing is, like, when you uncover all these things, it gets to a point where like nothing is out of the realm of possibility. I mean, the years and years of talking to whistleblowers, to talking to historians, to talking to researchers, journalists, and it's just like crazy story after crazy story, verified story after verified story, suppressed story after suppressed story. Like, it gets to a point where it's just like, I don't draw the line anywhere. Like, there is nothing that I will not entertain. Nothing is too crazy to be possible, or at least have a hint of truth to, because the world is much crazier than any of us could imagine. And I just remember years ago talking to Nick Bryan, and I've told the story before. I just we talked about Jeffrey Epstein, and we would talk about how there's this guy that everybody in the alternative media community knows is linked to the Clintons and the people in Hollywood, people in science, people in all aspects of life. And this guy, knowing, like, everybody knows that he's linked to pedophilia, child trafficking, all these things, and he has pictures. I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell is at the Clintons' daughter's wedding. It's like, there's all these, this guy is deep rooted into this world. He hangs out with Bill Gates. He hangs out with, and yet, like, people are like, you're crazy. Like, there's no way this is true, and then it comes out, and people, like, I just don't know if it's just like too hard for people to comprehend, or it just, to me, it just boggles my mind how it's like, now he became a household name, which I was super excited about, because I'm like, look, Bill Gates is finally looked at as suspicious, and he's not doing humanitarian things because he's trying to help people. He's doing it because he's trying to cover his real agenda. And which, it's funny because I just heard this story about the Nobel Peace Prize, and how Nobel, the guy who started it, came up with dynamite.
He invented dynamite. Yeah,
invented dynamite, and then they used to call him the Merchant of Death. And then what he wanted to do to clear his name, and like kind of because these guys, their legacy is very important to them, and what they leave behind, and how public perception of who they are, and they want to be seen as like these great people and these great inventors and these great historic figures. He created the Nobel Peace Prize, and nobody talks about dynamite when they talk about Nobel. They only talk. So it's like he's done a great job of like kind of cleaning up his the way the world looks at him, and the historical stories and events that revolve around his name. And it's same thing with the Oppenheimer, right? Like, what didn't they
Oppenheimer? I saw that film a couple of weeks ago when I was in Austin.
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet, but like, people say, like, he thought that this invention was going to end wars, right? And so and the thing with Bill Gates, it's like he's very much like these, look at the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, like all these families did a bunch of evil things, and did a bunch of affected the world in a negative light, and then they at the end of their lives are like, hey, let's start all these charities and put our names in all these libraries and all these things, because now maybe we can change history and rewrite history and make it look like we were a positive effect on humanity.
There's a couple of shows. I don't listen to NPR regularly, but there's a couple of lighthearted shows I listened to on Saturday. And sure enough, in the commercial break, the Oppenheimer Fund. And I'm thinking, wow, there's a legacy of that family. All of the patent rights they've got over the years, and the kids and the grandkids, they don't want to pay it to the IRS. Let's just donate it to NPR, whatever their motivation is. But you're right. Gentleman that the name slips my mind. I feel like an idiot here. There's just kind of a sensory overload. Ricky, do you ever get to that point where you have so many names in your mind, you're just trying to compartmentalize and figure out? He invented the neutron bomb, and he lived in Brentwood, in the section of LA, like literally 4 blocks from where OJ used to live. He said, yeah, I used to see OJ jogging down the sidewalk in front of my house all the time. Anyway, I had a chance to talk to him about 4, if not 5 times over the course of a year and a half. We wanted to get him on the film, and he had some serious health issues. He wasn't able to, he was camera shy, but he said, look, if you really want to get the expert's expert, do General Ben Parton. He really had a lot of admiration for General Parton. And the meeting, and I was going to bring this up with the allegory we had with Richard earlier. I sat down at General Parton's dining room table. This is after we had a steak dinner at Fort Belvoir. And I was only at his place for one night. It was a 48-hour trip out there from Oklahoma City to Alexandria, Virginia. And here we are at 4 o'clock in the morning, sitting at his dining room table. And it's like watching Einstein scribble out 7 pages of notes and equations and just this whole thought process and chain of custody of how the building was destroyed, what ordnance was used, where search and rescue could have come in. And this is a guy that literally, and there's a kind of a connection to Oppenheimer. I'm watching that movie. I remember sitting down and talking to General Parton. He's the head of the Pentagon Armament Lab for 18 years, tens of billions of dollars at his disposal. And he designed ordnance for the Air Force and the Navy. That was his segment that he designed. And he actually planned the Tet Offensive during the Vietnam War. Can you imagine having that on your shoulders? And he said he had to stay within the rules of engagement to minimize civilian casualties. The guy was an expert at what he did, but he also had a conscience and a moral compass. He says, we're just not going to go in there, completely haphazard and just, wreak havoc all over. He says, there's a method and to this madness, so to speak. Anyway, so for him to destroy small cities out in the middle of the White Sands Missile Range, he knew damn well what took that building down in Oklahoma City. And I was honored to sit there. And it wasn't until I'm at the boardroom in June of 2013, that I'm listening to Richard Grove, and I thought, wow, here's General Parton all over again. And I'm not patronizing Richard. I mean, that's the same caliber of expertise that I felt that I was in the presence of. And also on Richard's podcast, I'm proud to say he's still displaying the DVD case that's still wrapped in cellophane of our DVD on. It's right there, a principal shot right in the camera. And I couldn't be more humbled and more honored to have that as a connection to his show.
Yeah. And so knowing all this about historical events, when COVID was happening, did you immediately say, okay, here we go again? Like this is
Yeah, I told my dad, he was 85 at the time. That was the press conference at the White House. What was it, that Thursday? And then they did everything to shut down on Friday. And I told my dad, I says, Dad, I'm calling BS on this. I says, watch out for Fauci. He's a snake in the grass. Hell yeah. The nuclear plant, the siren red light was just going off in the back of my head. And I thought, watch out, strap on tight. This is going to be one hell of a ride. And it was.
Were you familiar with Fauci and some of his history?
Oh, it's horrible what he did with AZT and the AIDS thing back in '82. I was about 21 or 22 at the time that whole thing unfolded. Yeah, that bastard sat on his thumbs for 2.5 years, withholding patents to medicine that would have done good. And then he brought out AZT, which just exacerbated it, and just so he could get the patent rights on that. I mean, how much more insidious and sick can you be, knowing full well that you had the ability to help these guys out in a virus that you invented yourself? Basically he's burning down the house and has the insurance at the same time. And for him to come out and say, "Oh, I'm going to help you guys out," it's like, "Oh God, run for the hills as fast as you can. Get away from this guy." So yeah, I knew right away that we were in some deep Tim shoe coming up.
Yeah, and there's been, it's there was Jesse Ventura who kind of let me down a little bit because he did that whole special. Some people would send me the clip from Conspiracy Theories with Jesse Ventura about, and I
Sure.
forget who it was on the show that talked about like they're going to try to vaccinate everybody. They're talking about the depopulation agenda and trying to vaccinate everyone. So,
Alex had an expert on, and she was on his show about a month ago. He was able to find her. She was living in France at the time, I think.
oh,
Yeah,
he had her on. Oh, okay.
yeah. I was surprised to see that it was remote. It wasn't in studio, but wow, it's like God, I haven't seen her face in a while. But it was on Jesse's series, what you're talking about.
Yeah, because people would send me that clip, and it's like, and then when he kind of believed the hype, and I'm just like, how is he falling for this? Like, he shouldn't. He's been on this show, and I've always been a fan of his because he
Right.
he kind of mainstreamed some of these things that were kind of not mainstream. The idea that 9/11, that there could have been more to the story, and I kind of loved his strong personality where he would go on The View and still argue
Oh,
it. Like, he wasn't embarrassed to debate anybody because if he came to a conclusion, it's because he thought it out, and he's like, I have enough evidence to believe that there is something here, and I'll debate somebody on these things. And if it's a JFK assassination, if it's 9/11, whatever it may be. And then when COVID happened, I think his dislike of Trump blinded him from what was really going on. And
right.
I also think, like, there's probably something to, I'm 38, I haven't been to a doctor. I don't even know, maybe since high school. I don't go to, I exercise, I get vitamin D. I eat as healthy and as organic as possible. I make sure I sweat and detox. I mentally try to be as spiritual and as zen as possible in regards to like just being able to be grateful for the good things I have in life and not, spend my life stressing about the things I don't have. And just try to be mentally and physically in a good place. So, for me, I'm like, I don't, even if this is a somewhat serious virus, my immune system's ready to go. Like, if I get sick a little bit, I'll recover. I'm not worried about it. But maybe it had to do with the fact that he was older, because it did seem like older people were a little bit more concerned. When you're much closer to the finish line than the starting line, maybe you look at things a little bit differently, and maybe you just say, hey, you know what, I'm not taking these risks, these chances, and even if I don't trust these people, I want to live as long as possible. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because he really was one of the people. Don't, and same thing with Alex Jones. Like, Alex Jones gets a lot of crap for like this and that. It's like these people, like, a lot of us wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those guys. Like,
That's why I want to acknowledge him at the beginning of the show. I mean, and I don't do that often enough, and I'm not kissing ass, Ricky. I can't tell you how much that crew has done for us. And it was an honor to be at the American Liberty Awards show on August 12th, the event in Austin, and just to see those guys and to meet up with them again. It was an honor. So,
oh,
I
you were
mean,
there? Okay. Yeah, yeah. Charlie was there too. Charlie Robinson, who co-hosts the Union of the Unwanted with me. He
yeah,
hosts
you guys were, I think you guys were nominated for one of the categories, weren't you? I believe so.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was. So with this is just my luck. Remember when the machine wasn't working for the nominees? There's that one
Yeah.
category. Well, that was the one category I was in. So I
Oh,
didn't even get my name said out loud. But yeah, so for people who didn't watch it, what happened is, just like any award show, they'd be like, okay, so these are the nominees for this category, and they would say the nominees. And for one of the categories, the I don't know if the audio or video or something wasn't working, so they're like, okay, let's just say who won, and it was the category that I was nominated for. So it just bad luck, but either way, it was an awesome event. I hope they continue doing it. It's awesome to just all these people who did so much for opening people's eyes and waking people up to what was going on during COVID, and so many people who fought back, and I've had so many people on, like I had Dr. Peter McCullough on recently for I don't
yeah.
know He's been on probably like 3, 4 times or whatever it's been. But I every time he's on, I like I have to just tell him, similar to you, like I think I some people deserve that credit where I'm just like, dude, you put your career on the line. You didn't just say that, all these things now when it's safe to say it because it's so damn obvious,
Mhm.
nobody's gonna get mad at you, but you were speaking out and doing interviews when literally everybody was being censored. People were getting in arguments and with their friends and families were being torn apart, friendships were being torn apart, social media accounts were being banned. I'm like, that's when you did it, when it was the most difficult to do so. and
Exactly.
and he deserves a lot of credit for that. Same thing with Dr. Robert Malone, who came on my show. Mickey Willis, who's a freaking saint. What a great guy. He came
Yeah.
on my show. During all this, same thing. Like I couldn't thank him enough for being outspoken when it was the most difficult to do so, and to put out that documentary that really was just like the reason why I went viral. And I told Mickey this, numerous of times. I'm like, the reason why I went viral because what Dr. Judy Mikovits was saying in the documentary and what you were saying in the documentary made a lot more sense to people than what the TV was telling them. So the TV was telling them that there's a virus that's killing everybody and a quarter of the population is going to die. And everybody's looking around and they're like, I know the TV's telling me this, but I'm not seeing it. And I don't know anybody who's
The
dying.
hospitals aren't overrun. They got, empty entryways at the ER and,
There's
ambulance lined up. Yeah.
There's an Instagram page that was created, and what they were doing, they were posting people who were going into their local hospitals and filming the fact that there wasn't the lines that they were lying about,
They're doing a split screen to the network news and it's complete opposite.
and then they're
Wow.
lying about their coverage. There was that one instance when CBS News used, I think, a Italian ER room hospital footage, and then said, and then while reporting on local hospitals, we're showing this film, this just a full ER room that wasn't even in this country. It was in Italy, and and who knows if that was even true because we also saw a video of Chinese people dying in the streets and passing out, which again, like, why is there an investigation of like, where did that video come from? Okay, who approved showing that to the public, knowing it was going to scare the shit out of the public? And
Right.
who approved that? Where did that that footage come from? Like, why aren't people asking these questions? Why is ivermectin, and hydroxychloroquine made it illegal to prescribe in New York by a politician and not a doctor? It was all like the agenda was so clear, and the people like us in the alternative media community, like, I had Del Bigtree on right when Vax came out. I was a big fan of his. I had Dr.
Right.
Hooker on. Actually, I just had Dr. Brian Hooker on for the second or third time because he has a new book with Robert Kennedy Jr. called Vaxxed, Unvaxxed, Let the Science Speak. And it's all about comparing vaxxed and unvaxxed children and all the science on the negative effects of being vaccinated. So it's like, and I've been so deep rooted in big pharma, and for a long time I feel like that was the one area that the alternative media community like neglected a little bit. I'm like, I don't think you guys understand how dangerous these people really are. They're spending more money on lobbying than the military industrial complex. If the military gets a bunch of our money and uses it for evil, it's killing people overseas, which is not good. I'm not justifying that. But if
Right.
Big Pharma does evil, it's killing your brother, your sister, it's killing your family members, your loved ones, your neighbor. I mean, they're trying to get into your home. They're having a direct effect on you, and the vaccine agenda was like so obvious. That's why when Kennedy was on Rogan, I mean,
Mhm.
and I talked about this with Hooker, Dr. Brian
Right.
Hooker.
That was amazing.
It was absolutely like it to me, like somebody. I'm pretty outspoken. I don't like conflict, but I also don't like lies being spread. and I have to say something. So if somebody says something about vaccines, my wife will usually look at me and like hope that I keep my mouth shut because typically I have to interject and be like, okay, so this is the truth about vaccines. Like, let me inform you about the vaccine court. Let me inform you about how the rates of vaccines, the amount of vaccines people have been getting since 1986 have been going up. So has the rate of autism. So has the rate of autoimmune issues. So has the rate of every negative health issue you could think of. There has to be some, if there's correlation, there has to be something there. At least it should be investigated. By the way, like there's a vaccine core, which means that vaccine makers have no liability. And these are the same companies that also got us Oxycontin and got all these things, approved, and which led to overdoses everywhere. So to me, it just, it's so obvious that like, oh, did I lose you? I lost him. Maybe he didn't want to hear me talk anymore. Let me see when he comes back. And you're back.
Sure.
Well, you know what? Sometimes I need somebody to interject because I'll just keep rambling. The COVID thing gets me going.
That's all right. You can edit that. You splice that in. Okay.
Yeah, but it's just one of those things where it's just like it's mind-boggling that people will watch Dope Sick. People will watch. There's a new series I haven't started watching it yet. The filmmaker, who just was on the Rogan podcast. I started listening to some of it. It seems like he's definitely on our side. And it was called Painkiller, and it's about the same similar story, the OxyContin Sackler family.
Oh yeah.
And it's just like, if why do you think that the same companies that can do this to the public, can't try to give you a vaccine that's not safe, or why can't they get the FDA to approve something that they know is potentially going to harm more people than they're going to help? It's like this
Right.
stuff is just normal practice. Big pharma, we're one of two countries, us and New Zealand, which I'm sure most of the listeners know are the only countries that let them market on TV. And it's insane, the fact that they can market directly to the public, and the side effects are usually way worse than what you're trying to prevent in the first place. And then those side effects require other pills, and then those pills have side effects which require other pill. It's just like it's a great business, industry. Like, in the way you've made this system is just like you are creating just customers after customers after customers. And then even off-label use, like I get it. Like, okay, maybe you give somebody something and it works well for something else and you didn't know it. But like even that alone seems a little sketchy when you think about, like, okay, so this drug was tested for these reasons. The studies were for these reasons. We're looking for these things, and then we find out it helps something else. So now, without like, any other further research or an investigation on how this is going to affect the patient, I can just
And-
give them pill. Oh,
Okay, you're good. You're good now. Yeah.
okay. Yeah. So
Okay.
the off-label use thing is just insane. All of it is just insane. I mean, there's I've had Chris Bell on the show and Mark Bell actually, and they did a great documentary called Prescription Thugs, which just
Mhm.
really goes into just how dangerous big pharma really is. And again, we all know this. You go through the history of medicine, teas, root extracts, all these things were considered medicine for a long time until big pharma demonized all that stuff and then made prescription drugs the only thing you could get for that was considered medicine. Everything else was considered pseudoscience. And are you freezing up again, Chris?
No, I'm good. I'm good. You're all set.
Oh, I'm having a hard time
Are
hearing.
you there?
You're cutting in and out.
Okay, you there? Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Is that better?
I think your internet connection is
All right. Tell you what.
do you want to try jumping out
See,
into.
all right.
Awesome.
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah, I hear you clear. Hopefully you hear me clearly.
Okay.
So what has got your attention, and what have you been focused on since doing all these films and whatnot? Are you just basically keeping up with like the news and just constantly analyzing, and is that journalist in you and that investigative nature of yours still are you still deep rooted into?
I am. Yeah, we do have projects that are presented to us now and then. But again, we've got a new channel of funding, so I'm trying to work that. And I have actually two scripts I'm looking at on my shelf ahead of me here. A friend of mine out of Chicago who's done great work with CBS and NBC over the years. I've known him. Good God, we were just talking about this yesterday on the phone. Almost 18 years. I'm under a non-disclosure agreement. I can't talk about the projects per se, but we're very excited, and it's in the same vein. We're going to be chapterizing, doing the documentaries, and presenting the information in a very academic approach. Yeah, I have a more keen eye and a better sense, not so much reactionary or a cynical side of news, but I look at it for what it is and what it's not. And going back to the awards thing, and I think this is relevant for your listeners, Ricky, too. And the fact that you were even nominated is awesome. But the Rumble, if you log on to AmericanLibertyAwards.com, Rumble did an amazing job of archiving that whole event. So if you click on the top of the website, you'll see the main event, which I think lasted almost 2.5 hours. Rob Dew did a great job of emceeing, but there were so many people behind the scenes. And I looked at it on the production standpoint. It's like, wow, this is amazing how they pulled this off. Matt Baker and Frank Kavanaugh and that whole crew. And then if you scroll down below, there's the green carpet interviews that Christy Lee did a great job of interviewing a lot of the nominees. I mean, Chris Guy came in from Toronto. That whole backstory, how he got in through Mexico. But to see these people in person, it wasn't that I was starstruck. It was that I appreciated the fact that everybody was together under one roof, at least for that 2.5 to 3 hours. And Dr. McCullough, and a lot of folks don't know that 2 people passed out because of heat issues at the event. There's Dr. McCullough helping this guy, literally, 5 feet from him sitting. Jim Hoft with Gateway Pundit, very first winner of the very first award. He's sitting like 6 feet to my left. Kara Castronova, who's done an amazing job with, the legal analysis and trying to get the J6 detainees. She's literally sitting a foot from me. These are people are real. This is not fake, folks. These people, like Ricky said, sweat it out every single day, and they bust their tail and go beyond what is expected. I mean, these are the heroes. So I wanted to say that, and that's what inspired me to, it kind of gives you a whole new level of, you're in your zone. You've got that creative juice going, and to see these other folks coming together. I've got a new friend in Matt Baker. He helped me get the nomination certificate for Jeremy Brown, who's incarcerated north of here. I presented it to him, and I met his fiance. In fact, after we're done with their interview, I'm going to meet them at 7:30. His fiance and the head of the podcast for dinner. So, again, that ripple effect. Getting back to the title of your story, but answering your question, and that's what inspires me to continue on and say, hey, what we're doing is worthwhile. There's no dead end on this thing. There is a purpose. There is light at the end of the tunnel. I just keep up with the current events. Talking about Big Pharma, Victoria Nuland in the State Department. What did she do back in 2014? Making sure that the bioweapons labs were funded in Ukraine. Well, that's a whole other reason why NATO didn't want Russia to get in there, to find out what the hell was going on there. So for whatever you're comfortable with, what level of penetration you want to do on the news stories, just go with it. And you're going to find that you're going to want a little more and a little more. And you're going to find out that what we were told and what we summarize in State of Mind, Psychology, and Control, from the day that you are born to the day that you die, you are controlled in some manner. But that doesn't mean that you're on the losing end. You're actually on the winning end. The purpose of that film was to give you a primer of the information of, this is what's hitting you every single day, folks. You have a choice to either turn that in a positive spin or be subject to the negative powers of it. And there are a lot of smart people out there. I'd say 90% of our audience are very intelligent. and they could see through all of this stuff. And we just want to give them the tools to be able to make decisions on their own and empower their kids to do the same thing. We have to leave a legacy for the kids, right? So that's where I am, and I'm fired up every day I get up, and I've always wanted, look at the news and look at new projects. And now that we got the funding sources coming in, I'd say within the next 8-9 months, I think we're going to go into pre-production on a new project. So
That's exciting. Yeah, we'll definitely have you back for that. And I think in Monday, I don't know when I'll release this, but hopefully it'll be before Monday, September the 11th. But I believe we're doing a Union of the Unwanted September 11th. And we're going to be talking about false flags and September 11th and we've done episodes on September 11th with Jason Burmis and Richard Gage and stuff like that. But I think we're going to kind of focus not on just September 11th, because probably everything that could be said has been said about that. We've
right.
had tons of interviews with James Corbett and so many of the leading researchers in that in those topics. But we want to talk about why it's relevant and the link between all of them, and then all the other related topics. So if you're available September 11th, I'll send you the Zoom link and you can join us. It'll be Monday night, September 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay.
I'll send you a little reminder afterwards if you want to join us. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Union Unwanted. It's a big kind of roundtable panel show. Mel K will be on there. Chrissy Lee's been on there. I co-hosted with Charlie, Sam Tripoli, and Midnight Mike from the OBDM show. So it'll be a fun discussion, and it'll be a blast. So hopefully you can join us on that, and hopefully you can keep us updated on future projects as you can start releasing some information. Be more than happy to have you on and start promoting it. And yeah, I mean, it's the cool thing about going to those type of events, like you mentioned, it does get the creative juices going. I remember when I was playing music on a regular basis, every time I went to a concert, I just got motivated to want to go home and write music. I'm like, I was just inspired. So I know that feeling of just going to those events. Last event I went to was like 2019. I went to the Red Pill Expo with Richard Grove. He was down there. He invited me to come join him, and hung out with his buddies and watch him speak. And then, obviously Griffin was there, and many other people, Del Bigtree. It was in Hartford in Connecticut, and same thing. Like, you go to one of those events and you just cannot wait to get home and do your part in in just contributing, something to the world. You just get inspired. So definitely awesome.
Yeah.
For people who want to keep up with your work and want to keep up with, if you're on any social media platforms or anything like that, let people know. We'll remind them again where they can watch the films, and then any social media platforms you might be on, let them know. You still there, Chris?
Yeah, okay. Basically, just contact me at my email address. We're not on social media now. We've had some issues with people phishing and duplicating our pages and causing some problems. So anyway, contact me at ccemery@protonmail.com, or and log on to our website, freemindfilms.com, for all of our projects. And love to get any of your feedback through the email, and love to get your support. Once again, you can watch the films for free. We do make our money on the ad revenue, so it's much better than Amazon.com Prime. So
yeah,
and we're, by the way, when
oh, you're breaking up again. And you're breaking up again. Can't hear you, Chris.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
All right.
You had a couple last words before the CIA kicks us off.
Yes. So anyway, freemindfilms.com, and we'd appreciate all your support. And Ricky, thank you for having me on. Text me that information on the your show coming up on September 11th. I'll be happy to jump in.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll send you a text message and I'll email you as a little reminder. And yeah, it should be fun because I think that's the first time you've been on, and it'll be great timing because it's obviously it's September 11th and it's a topic you know a lot about, and we're talking about false flags, and that's something you've been.
This is the dossier we have just on the 9/11 connection with Oklahoma City. Stuff from all over the world. It took our film crew almost 3 years to put this together. I'll be happy to touch on that if you want. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, keep doing all the amazing work you're doing. I cannot wait to see what your upcoming projects are, and what the future holds, and hopefully we see each other next week on Monday, and we'll talk then. And then of course I'll send you links to the show once it's up and live. Feel
Thank
free
you.
to share it or wherever you would like, and also like Chris said, please check out those films. Check out those documentaries. They're great films also to send to friends and family, send the links to them, because they're not, it's evidence based. It's not just a bunch of, it's not like a conspiratorial documentary where it's just like a bunch of you're connecting dots that don't really connect. It's like, this is facts. These are well researched documentaries that you cannot deny after watching them, and can really change some people's perspectives on things and get people on board. So please share the films, support great work like Free Mind Films and the stuff that Chris has done throughout the years. And we'll talk again. Enjoy the beautiful, I'm sure, Florida weather, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Ricky. God bless. Take care.
Take care.